The 1st of July 2001 is a day that will live in the memory of one British family for all of the worst possible reasons. On a hot summer's day, what can only be described as a wholesome family outing rapidly turns into a midsummer's nightmare. 8-year-old Sarah Payne would go from playing out the front with her older brothers and younger sister to never being seen again. Now, the area of West Sussex where this innocent, kind-natured and beautiful young girl went missing from has one of the lowest crime rates in the whole of the UK, and therefore immediate concern wasn't through the roof. But as moments turned into minutes and minutes turned into hours, the concerns would skyrocket for this young girl. A nationwide manhunt would take place, but police would not have to look too far to find the perpetrator. But proving who was responsible for this sick and heinous crime would be a lot harder than the police expected it to be. This is the tragic story of Sarah Payne.
In this video, we will be covering the tragic passing of the young, innocent girl, Sarah Payne, and we'll be going through the details of this murder investigation. We will be piecing together information which is publicly available, which in itself can be potentially flawed. And remember, we cover these cases as if just two normal guys were sitting in a pub talking about true crime. So, without further ado, let's get into the video and let me tell you a little bit more about who Sarah Payne was. Sarah Payne was born on the 13th of October 1991. In July 2000, when we start this story, she was just 8 years old. Sarah lived in Hersham, Surrey with her mother and father, Michael and Sarah Payne, and her three siblings, Lee, who was 13, Luke, who was 11, and her younger sister, Charlotte, who was just 5. By all accounts, her family was a very, very close one. The four kids often played together and had a seriously tight bond. Sarah was described as the imagination of the family and full of energy. She obviously had a seriously big heart and a very, very happy childhood, and she talked about loving the Spice Girls and often formed duets with her younger sister, Charlotte. What's clear is that up to this point, the family's life was completely normal and harmonious, but that was all about to change. Let's go to July the 1st, 2000, and find out where Sarah and her family were on that fateful day.
So Sarah's grandparents, Terence and his partner Leslie, lived on the coast of East Sussex, more specifically a place called Kingston Gorse. And this was a very small, tight-knit community with only about 396 residents at that time. It was about an hour and 15 minutes away from Hersham, where Sarah lived with her family. So very, very often the family would take trips, days out, sometimes weekends away to see Sarah's grandparents as they lived by the coast, and there was just so much fun for the children to have down there. So on this particular day, Sarah, her two older brothers and her younger sister are playing in a field which is pretty much directly opposite Sarah's grandparents' house. Now, Sarah's grandfather, Terence, decides that he wants to take her parents up to see a house that was having some work being done on it in the village. So they go up there, and although Sarah and her younger sister are obviously not old enough to be left on their own, they were with her brothers, Luke and Lee, who were 13 years old and 11 years old respectively. Sarah's grandfather, Terence, her mother, Sarah, and her father, Michael, stop off in a nearby pub on the way back from looking at the house that was having the work being done, and they spend approximately 20 minutes in that pub. Now, when they arrive home, they are greeted by Terence's partner, Leslie, who is frantic. Straight away, she asks where Sarah is, whether or not they have seen her or whether Sarah is with them. Now, it was reported that when Sarah was playing with her brothers and sisters in the field across the road, she actually fell over and hurt herself, and so decided to walk back to her grandparents' house. And when you cut through a small bush, you literally come out onto the road opposite the grandparents' house. However, as Sarah did so and walked into the distance, that would be the last time that her brothers, her sister, or any of her family would ever see her again. Now, after looking far and wide themselves, eventually 4 hours after Sarah goes missing, her mother, Sarah, calls the police and a nationwide manhunt begins.
So shall we address the elephant in the room here? We have done a video, if you haven't seen it, definitely go and have a look about it, all about the Madeleine McCann case. We spoke about the negligence in that case of the parents and how they were in the tapas bar 150 metres away and weren't looking after poor old Madeleine. Now, in this case, the parents have gone for a walk down to the beach. They've stopped off at a pub. They've taken about 20 minutes in the pub, and then they've started walking home. Should we not tar the parents with the same brush that we do the McCanns?
I think there's a case to say that you can tar the parents with a brush, but I don't think the same brush, because I think that there is a lot of circumstances that are very, very much different. Now, Madeleine was left on her own with siblings, yeah? But those siblings were infant children, right? Sarah Payne was left on her own with her 11 and 13-year-old brothers, as well as one younger sibling, right? So Sarah Payne was, I believe, 9 years old? 8 years old,
at the time.
She was 8 years old at the time. Now, when I was, I don't know, 5, 6 years old, I was being left alone with my 12, 13-year-old sisters, brothers, things like that. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that actually, I was born in 1994. Sarah Payne went missing in 2001. We were around the same age, right?
Yep.
So it wasn't uncommon for me to be left alone. I wasn't in a rough area. I was on the outskirts of South London. However, my area that I lived in was a million times rougher and had a million times higher crime rate than where Sarah Payne went missing from. Not only that, they weren't in a foreign country. They were in familiar surroundings. So with all that being said, I still wouldn't have left the kids on their own. I still wouldn't have trusted a young teenager and an 11-year-old to look after those kids. But at the same time, the comfort of knowing that a number of feet away is Leslie, one of the grandparents or the grandparents' partner, and as well, you know, there's the two older brothers there. They're in familiar territory. I think that I would feel a lot more comfortable with this. But if I can rephrase your question and say, will the parents kick themselves? Will the parents forever, you know, feel some sort of responsibility that they should have been there? Yes, I'm sure Sarah's parents do feel that.
So in terms of this area, you mentioned like a low crime rate area and that coming into your thinking about, you know, being worried about it or not that worried about it. This is a seaside town. Like, we're talking about a very sparsely populated area, countryside area, an area that definitely didn't have too much going on in terms of serious crime. Would you have left your kids in that area and felt a little bit more safe than if it would be in South London, for example?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I've literally just come back from Norfolk, and we spend our time in a little, close to a seaside town. It's a little village called Docking. It's near a place called Hunstanton. Sometimes you can drive down the road and you can drive for 20 minutes and you won't drive past another car. That's how sparse it is, that area, right? I still wouldn't leave my child unattended, even if it was with, you know, even if my child was with her cousins that are older and stuff like that, I still wouldn't leave them in that area. But I think that's a sign of the time, how things have changed. Because when I was growing up, my parents still had that cottage in this area of East Anglia, and we used to get left, we used to go down the park, we used to do all these things. Times are so different. And if you have younger audiences watching this, because the world has changed so much, it's very, very hard to get your head around what children were doing back in those days and how parents treated their children back in those days.
So I just want to say thank you to every single one of you that has subscribed to the Joey and Josh channel so far. We've been doing this now for just 6 months. It feels like so much longer than that. And over 22,000 of you are subscribers to this channel. So I just want to say thank you so much. This is a great time, if you aren't subscribed, to subscribe to the channel. And if you want to like this video and see many more like it, hit a like button on the video.
Not only that, we also have a membership scheme scheme where you pay £5 per month, and for that you get a members only exclusive live stream once every single week where you're able to interact with myself and Josh, have your questions on cases we've covered, give your suggestions for cases you want covered, and every single video that gets uploaded off of this channel will be accessible to the members up to 48 hours before it drops for the general public.
Big love to every single one of you, whether you're a subscriber, not subscribed, or a member of the channel. Thank you so much for watching and joining us on this journey. Now let's get back into the video.
So we've got an apparent timeline of events, albeit very vague, but we've not got any sightings, any witnesses or anything like that at this point, have we?
No. The only witness sightings that we possibly have is the siblings. And at this point in the immediate aftermath after this, they're keeping very quiet about it. I mean, they're not divulging too much information, to be honest with you. Like, you can actually say it's a traumatic situation. They're really scared. They probably feel implicated, and they probably feel incredibly guilty. So at this moment, they're not revealing too much.
But one of the key things here is that none of the siblings saw anyone take Sarah or saw anyone with Sarah. So you can understand why, you know, they might not want to tell the police about a sighting because it might be so insignificant that they don't want to take the police off of the trail for their missing sister. Could that be along the lines of what you're thinking here?
I think that could absolutely be it. I mean, look, when I was 13, I didn't want to sort of show my own guilt and sort of like say something that would lead someone astray, especially in something like this. So yeah, basically where we're at right now is the siblings aren't giving too much away, and so the police have to really start their investigation. Now, what they find and what they start off with was that there was an actual sighting of a strange vehicle at a petrol station very close to the area. So that was the first piece of evidence that they had to start them building a case. And then there was a big break in the case. Lee, the young sibling who actually was the last person to see poor old Sarah, actually came forward and told his parents that he found something and remembered something very unusual. Lee told them that Sarah had hit her head and walked off, but he also shared that he saw a white van driving away from Peak Lane. That was a road that was a dead end, and it effectively wasn't a through road for other traffic, right? So this was a very big breakthrough in the case. Lee was able to share some information on what the driver of the van actually looked like. He said that he was a scruffy, unkempt and greasy man with yellowish teeth, and noted that this man smiled and waved at him before then driving off. So detailed was this information that Lee was actually able to provide the police with enough sort of like, you know, imagery and enough circumstantial information that they were actually able to create an e-fit of a potential suspect. And so this is where the police really started going into gear and started serious action. So a huge manhunt ensued from the evidence, and during this time, police and members of the public were still trying to find missing Sarah. Hundreds of volunteers and over 1,000 police officers were involved, and a 20-mile radius around the disappearance site was extensively and painstakingly searched. Michael and Sarah go on national TV several times, pleading to the British public to help find their little girl. And on the 17th of July, 16 days after Sarah went missing, her body was tragically discovered. So the police now determine the case to be a murder inquiry.
Yeah, this case just gets more horrific and horrific as it goes on, but this is one of the parts that personally disturbed me the most. You know, usually when there's been a murder, you'll find a body in a shallow grave. You might find it in water. This body was literally left on the side of the road as if it were roadkill, as if it were the sort of thing you would see on a country lane when a deer has been hit or a fox has been hit. And I really don't want to go into the details of the body too much, but much like, you know, certain forms of roadkill, it was a case that animals and wildlife had actually got to the body itself, which is, yeah, it's just absolutely heartbreaking to think of that happening, even once deceased, to this beautiful little girl.
And what I find the most troubling about this moment as well is that Sarah actually had to be identified by her father, and he had to see her in that state. And it just keeps getting worse, to be honest. The police do the post-mortem and they find that she very clearly was murdered. And in fact, she might have actually been strangled, and that it could have actually been a sexually motivated attack, although the exact details were really difficult to ascertain because of the composition and the condition of the body. So it just truly is brutal, and we won't go into too much more detail of that. And so police really now start ramping up the search. They look at the local area, and they look up leads in there, and they start actually looking and identifying potential people within this area.
So one of the first people that the police interviewed when this case moved towards an abduction theory was a man called Roy Whiting, and they interviewed him for good reason, because 5 years prior, Whiting had abducted and sexually assaulted a girl of a similar age to Sarah in nearby Crawley. He was found guilty and sentenced to 4 years in prison, but as we know with most of these sick fuckers, these sexual predators are back on the street a lot sooner than that, and Roy Whiting only served about 2.5 years of that sentence. A psychiatrist who assessed Whiting after his conviction said that he was very likely to re-offend when he was released. Much like many of the evil characters that you hear us speak about in the cases that we cover, Whiting himself came from a broken home. He was born in 1959 and was one of 6 children. However, he was only one of 3 that survived growing up, after 3 of his other siblings died during infancy. When he was a teenager, his mother left home and Roy stayed with his father. However, things at one point were actually looking up for Roy Whiting. He got himself a job as a mechanic, he met a woman, and even started his own business. And in 1998, he married, and by 1997, he had even fathered a son with his partner, who would become his new wife in 1998, the following year. However, not long after, Roy's business started to fail, and in line with this, his marriage started to fail too. Struggling for cash and coming to terms with his sudden downwards trend in his life, Roy Whiting started to hit hard times. However, in the year 1990, the same year that his divorce was made official from his first wife, Roy Whiting fathers another child with another woman. Now, with his history and the fact that he was on the sexual offenders register, when Sarah Payne goes missing, Roy Whiting is immediately targeted for questioning by the police. They turn up at his house the following morning after Sarah goes missing, July the 2nd, approximately 9 a.m, and it's reported that Roy Whiting is not in the house that day. But the police weren't taking no for an answer, and they came back that evening when Roy was in. They actually sat and questioned him for well over an hour and a half, but Roy did have somewhat of an alibi as to where he was the day before. Whiting claimed that he was at a fun fair at around 5:30 p.m. in Hove near Brighton, and that by 9:30 he was actually back at his flat. Now, bearing in mind this was back in the year 2000, CCTV was around, but probably not so much at fun fairs. The alibi was somewhat credible, at least in the short term. Now, an observation made by one of the officers at the time was that Roy Whiting didn't show any compassion or any empathy towards Sarah, and you might be thinking, well, that's normal, this man's a sexual predator, he's an offender. By this point, the police had actually interviewed multiple sexual offenders, and it was the same police force that were going and interviewing these guys, and they said that Whiting was the only one who actually came across as very cold, very unconcerned, and, as I say, showed no empathy towards Sarah. However, the real cause for concern was when shortly after this visit, the police come back again to question Roy Whiting for a second time. Now, Roy is actually out the front in his white van at the time, and upon seeing the police car pull in, Roy Whiting fled the scene.
This is actually a bit of an insane part of this story, to be honest with you. This is the second time that Roy Whiting's actually involved in a police chase. So let me just rewind back very, very slightly to give you a bit more of a sense of the police's interactions with Roy Whiting, especially around this case, right? So obviously, as Joey has said, this guy's got a crime-ridden past and quite frankly should have been an immediate person that the police go to. And to be fair to the police, they actually did. So they went round to his flat in Littlehampton on the afternoon of July the 2nd, 2000. And basically, that's where he gives this sort of funfair alibi. Basically, they tried to knock down the door, they tried to find him, he's not there, and then they actually waited around to get him. So basically, they ended up finding him. And when they actually take him into custody and ask him questions, that's then where he gives a series of the interviews where he gives no comment after no comment, which is what every single guilty person in the entire world does. So that should have been a big red flag from that get-go moment. And during that time, they actually search his vehicle and they find that they've got a receipt basically for fuel from a garage on the A24, and that actually contradicts the alibi straight away. So as Joe said, apparently he's at a fun fair, but they found evidence that directly contradicts that. So again, they keep questioning him, but after 2 days in custody, they can't find any other evidence, and so they have to release him. But this is where Roy actually makes a massive mistake. And this is where he actually gets involved in one of the other police chases that he was actually in. So on July the 23rd, 2000, Roy steals a Vauxhall Nova in Crawley. And this entire police chase is actually caught on camera. We'll actually show this now. And he actually ends up crashing at the end of that police chase. And he's actually arrested and charged with both the car theft and the dangerous driving. What that then means is that he's actually later in the year convicted and he's actually sentenced to 22 months in prison. Now, that is a good thing because it allows the police to actually do more and more searches, and they actually forensically test the Fiat Ducato van that he was driving at the time.
So just quickly, hold on. So he's in there on a driving offence.
He is, yes.
So that means at this point he isn't on the non-swing.
No, he's just in with the normal population, every other common criminal. He's just there.
So people will know who he is at this point, and he'll be suspected, and whether he's done it or not, a lot of prisoners don't care. He's got a price on his head.
Yeah. Is that how simple it would work? He will literally be fucked. People will know about it. They'll have heard the name. They'll know the crimes. Or they'll find them out.
Unless he's on non-swing, it will be.
So while he's in this prison, it's very clear that the police go and they actually forensically search the van, and they find quite a lot of evidence. Now, going back again, a member of the public finds one of Sarah's shoes just strewn and left on the side of the road, and her parents actually went and identified this shoe, and they acknowledged that it was hers. It was what she was wearing on that day. Well, on that shoe, there were actually fibres linked back to that van. Now, there was also a big case and a big sort of episode of Crime Watch all about this case, trying to find out what happened, trying to ascertain the murderer or the person that abducted poor Sarah. Now, during that Crime Watch episode, they actually showed that the wooden panelling that was inside a van had been burned, and a member of the public had found it. Now, when they searched Whiting's van, they actually found that the interior, the wooden panelling, had actually been removed. So again, it's another thing linking it back to that. But what they found inside of the van when they actually searched it is perhaps the most troubling thing that I've seen in relation to this case. This sick fucker had things like children's blankets, children's toys, a curtain with a clown pattern, rope, a pickaxe, a bucket, knives, cable ties, handcuffs, sweet treats, and baby oil. I mean, that is a series of evidence that immediately just screams, this is the guy that did it.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't Sarah, like it was before, it was someone else, and it would have been others, potentially many, many more, that he would have tried to get in the back of that van.
100%. Now, the one piece of evidence that made this guy be absolutely banged to rights was on a red sweatshirt that he actually had inside of that van, and it was a single fibre of Sarah's hair. And that basically meant that the police had enough of a case to be able to go and take this guy to court. So, in February the 4th, 2001, Whiting was charged with the abduction and murder of Sarah Payne. Now, this horrendous man, this awful geezer, actually pled not guilty, and it meant that the parents and the family had to sit through a 4-week trial. And as we say, during this episode and what I've just said, the evidence was extensive. The guy was banged to rights, and he knew he was banged to rights, but he still pled not guilty. It's just ridiculous.
Well, this is one of the things you get with these cases, right? When there's obviously a sexual gratification, there's also a empowerment gratification. There's also a gratification that you will get from seeing people's devastation, you know, the tragedy, the way you have ruined lives. And that can often, you know, lead into a sexual gratification for these monsters. So it's actually very, very common for them to do everything they need to just until it comes to them actually getting up and giving their own evidence and speaking themselves, you know, much like the Tia Sharp case with Stuart Hazel.
100%. And like that case, this guy was deemed to be guilty, and he was given life imprisonment by the judge on December the 12th, 2001. Now, in 2010, that sentence was actually reduced from a life sentence to just 40 years, which means this guy will be eligible for parole in 2041 when he is 82 years old. Now, I hope, much like you do, I'm sure as well, Joey, is that the parole board actually listened to the fucking psychologist this time and listened to what their evidence was last time. They said this guy could absolutely reoffend, and they hope that they actually keep him in prison.
Yeah, and this is the thing, like, they often deem it on whether they believe you're a danger to society or not, but this man's clearly a danger to society. He struck again after the first time and after he was imprisoned. And to be honest, right, if you're looking at it from an age-wise perspective and thinking, oh, well, he's older, then it might be easier for him when he's 85 odd years old or something like that. Because what do we do with old people?
Go on, tell me.
We're more trusting of them.
Yeah.
We're more trusting of them. And there'll be a lot of young people who this case was just too far in years before they were born to know who this man is. And not only that, I think there'd be outcry from the public, and I think he would come under attacks from the public. But for your lot's pleasure, it's not just the public that he needs to be worried about, because this man has been attacked multiple times in jail, and here's just a few of the attacks for your enjoyment. So HMP Wakefield, often dubbed the Monsters Mansion, is where Roy Whiting resides, and my God, he has had one hell of a time residing in HMP Wakefield. This is a prison that has housed the likes of Ian Huntley, Ian Watkins, Harold Shipman, Colin Ireland, Levi Belfield and Charles Bronson, just to name a few. So on the 4th of August 2002, Ricky Tregaskis, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, done Roy Whiting across the face with a prison-made shank. Basically, left him with a 6-inch scar across his cheek and needing urgent hospital treatment. Now, Tregaskis himself is not a hero. He was a murderer and was serving a life sentence. He actually had 6 years added onto his sentence for this attack. In my eyes, worth it. In July 2011, Whiting was stabbed in the eye. Now, Whiting never actually pressed charges against whoever stabbed him, and neither police or prison services felt that it was necessary to carry out an investigation. See what you done there, lads. Like it. On the 8th of November 2018, 2 inmates helped themselves into Roy Whiting's prison cell and gave him a good old-fashioned prison staying. Unfortunately, they only managed to carry out half of the job, as they did not manage to end the life of Roy Whiting. He did then head back to HMP Wakefield. However, quite recently, on the 11th of February 2024, he was once again stabbed in his prison cell and taken to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. So he's keeping himself busy inside. That's the main thing.
So obviously the prison conditions and what happened to Roy Whiting is a rare shining light in what a terrible, terrible case. But there's also another one, Sarah's Law. Now, this is a law and a scheme that allows parents, carers or guardians to formally ask police if a person who has contact with their child has a record of child sexual offences. Now, this is hugely impactful for people in this case, and I'm sure has prevented so many more crimes that are similar to this. And in fact, in the first year that the law was actually implemented, there were over 900 applications, resulting in the protection of approximately 200 children. So clearly it's very, very successful. And Sarah Payne was actually recognised with an MBE, so, you know, a member of the Order of the British Empire, in December 2008 for her tireless work. So basically Sarah, after this case, didn't just let this go, didn't just let the injustice of the, you know, the judicial and the political system let it go. She was constantly fighting for laws to protect young children and to prevent what had happened to her daughter, and she was, you know, given that recognition. And I think absolutely rightly so. She'd been through so much, and I think she deserved that recognition as well.
So after going through a horrific experience, as Josh said, there was a small silver lining there for Sarah Payne, Sarah's mum, and the way that she has actually managed to leave an impact on not only Great Britain but the world as part of the tragic circumstances that unfolded around her daughter's death. Now, as for Sarah Payne's father, Michael, his story is so much sadder. He suffered massively with depression following the disappearance of his daughter, Sarah. After 18 years of marriage in August 2003, he separated with Sarah Payne's mum, and subsequently actually became an alcoholic, leading to a 16-month jail term for attacking his brother with a glass in December 2011 while intoxicated. And on the 30th of October 2014, he was found deceased at home in Maidstone, Kent, and police said that there were no suspicious circumstances over the death. So obviously a case that has hit Sarah's family hard, has hit many families hard, and was a huge crime case in the early 2000s in Great Britain. A case that, as always, we find it hard to cover, but we do so for you guys, and we want your suggestions in the comment section below. Let us know what videos you would like to see and what cases you would like to see us cover next time out. Thank you very much for making it to the end of another video. If you haven't already, please hit a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more content. We will see you all in the next one.